Starting the assembly now. Just want to make sure everything is cleaned out nicely. All the threads are cleaned out. If you had the oil filter on here, there's a good chance the oil might have been dripping into the threaded holes. So you want to make sure they're all cleaned out. So we're going to start with the oil pump housing. Put assembly lube in there. Put some on the pinion shaft as well. Now, per the service manual, you want to put the O-ring on this port stop here, the little snout. Some people put the O-ring in the housing, but there's more risk of getting it pinched that way. So we're just going by service manual instructions. You want to give it a good push with your thumb. And that's it. It's all in. I put assembly lube inside and outside the gears. Scavenge your rotor gears. So put them all together. Bit of lube on the separator plate. Get this wave washer. The other separator plate. And we got the feed gears. Align the flats. There we go. Now we're gonna put assembly lube in the inner cam bearings. Assembly lube on the journals, cam lobes, and the mating surface where the oil pump is going to be pulled to, and the bushing here for the pinion shaft. We already put assembly lube on the chain and the pad before. Make sure you put a little bit of oil in the O-ring and install it. If you have a 2000 up crankcase and you have an extra boss here to feed the balancers, you have an extra O-ring in here. Just double check the oil pump is seated properly. If you pinch the O-ring, it's gonna cause massive sumping issues and premature wear and failure. Also make sure that you removed the retaining pin from here. So we're ready to install the cam plate. Make sure it all goes flush to the case and is seated properly. So now we're going to run in the screws for the cam plate. Strip of oil just under the head of the screw here for more accurate torque setting. And a little bit of Loctite, blue Loctite on there. So let's knock them down. Knock them down into 2 steps. Initial step is 45 inch-pounds. And the torquing order is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Final torque is 95 inch-pounds. Going for the lower end of the spec here because these two screws, they don't really have a lot of threads in there because they have the dowels and they're quite easy to strip out. So just to be on the safe side, torquing everything down to 95 inch-pounds. Double checking. Same with the oil pump screws. Drip of oil here under the head and blue Loctite on the threads. And run them in. I've run them all in until they just make contact with the cam plate. Now I'm going to back them out half a turn. So the bike is jacked up in 5th gear, plugs are out. We're going to center the oil pump on the shaft by turning the wheel while I'm snugging down these screws in this order. 1, 2, 3, 4. They're all snuck down. Now we're gonna do a 2-step torquing here as well. The first one is 45 inch-pounds. .95 inch-pounds. Double check. Just gonna rotate the wheel one more time just to make sure there's no binding. And the camshafts, make sure there's no binding. All set. Now it's a good time to give these bearings a bit of oil here. Now we're going to line them up. So we got the 2 marks over here with straight edge. You can line them up. I already turned the crankshaft so that the flat will line up with the pinion gear and the mark will be all lined up with the mark on the cam plate. So now we're going to do the sprocket alignment. So you have a bunch of spacers in the spacer kit. I sort of figured out without torquing everything down that the 337 might be the right one. So install the spacer here, your sprocket, put some oil in here and on the splines already. Use your old bolts. I can't use the old bolt for the cam sprocket because my old cam was a keyed cam and it had a smaller diameter bolt, so I need to use the old bolt, but I removed the locking agent. So I need to torque down these bolts 15 foot-pounds to be able to check the alignment. I'm just improvising here again because I don't have the special tool that goes in between teeth, so I can torque down the cam sprocket as well. So I'm just using the old chain guide here. Hopefully it'll do the trick. It did. The crank bolt is not a problem because I lowered the bike now, so it's engaged. So checking the alignment, just put a straight edge to the face of the pinion sprocket and check to see whether you can put a 10,000 feeler gauge in the cam sprocket. Looks like I can. So I need to go up a size. The gap has to be under 10,000s. So we're gonna go ahead and loosen these up and swap out the spacers. So the one I had in there was 337. So I need the next one up, which is 347. All right, let's check it again. Straight edge here. And I can no longer insert 10,000s feeler gauge in here. So we're all set. So we can go ahead and remove the sprockets, put the chain on, and put it back on as an assembly. So just double check to make sure that the cams are aligned. I got the chain over the sprockets, just let it hang and align the dots. Now we're gonna put the sprockets on here. Just like that. As you can see, they're perfectly aligned. Put a bit of oil under the flange of the bolt and both sides of the washer. Bit of red Loctite on the threads. Don't need much. Same here, bit of oil under the head of the bolt. Bit of red Loctite on there. Might be too much. I'm going to torque these down to 15 foot-pounds. Now we need to loosen them up by a full turn. It's a full turn. Now final torque the cam bolt to 34 foot-pounds. Final torque the pinion sprocket bolt to 24 foot-pounds. Bring the sprockets back to alignment, just so we can make sure everything's aligned. Now we just need to install the primary cam chain tensioner. Got it all looped up inside like before. Just remove the pin. Got the screws ready. Blue Loctite on them. Torque it down between 90 and 120 inch-pounds. We're gonna put some assembly lube on the chain. Just gonna align the sprockets. Nicely aligned. Just double checking the lobes as well. They're facing down. So the rear cam is on the base circle. When these two dots are aligned, the cam lobes are away from the lifters and your rear cylinder is atop the center on the compression stroke. So we're gonna leave it like that because we're gonna start assembling the rear cylinder and we don't have to mess around finding TDC on a compression stroke. Installing the cam cover now. Got the brand new gasket on here. The cam cover is cleaned out nicely. I cleaned the screws as well. Drop of oil between the washer and the head of the screw, just for more accurate torque setting. No Loctite. So I'm just gonna run them all in and snug them down. So I snuck down all the screws. First I'm gonna do 55-inch bounds in the following order. The final torque is between 90 and 120 inch bounds. I'm going for 110. Installing the lifters now. Got the boards all lubed up. Got the rear intake lifter here, all lubed up as well. Put some assembly lube on the roller and just engine oil all over. The oil port will be facing outward because that's how it came out. So hence I marked it this way. The manual will say that the oil port should be facing inward towards the cylinder, but it doesn't matter with Twincam 88, and frankly this is how it came out from factory because I've had this bike since 1500 miles, never been apart before. So we're installing it exactly the same way because of the wear pattern. Just hold the flats like that. Lube it up nicely. Just holding the flats. Anti-rotational pin will stop him from rotating. We got the gasket here. Already got the new O-rings in the cover. Gonna run all the screws in and snug them down in crisscross pattern. I couldn't use my torque wrench on the inner screws because I couldn't get a good enough angle with my tool without stripping the heads. So what I ended up doing was I used my shortcut Allen wrench and I tightened the screws evenly in a crisscross pattern. And then I finally verified the torque setting on the outer screws and I got to pretty much 110 inch bounds with the Allen wrench. So that's all good. The good thing about the Allen wrench is that once you get to around 100 or 110 inch pounds, this will start bending. So it's very unlikely that you're gonna over tighten it. Now we're gonna put the thicker O-rings in the cylinder head here. I'll put some assembly lube on there. We get a push-up cover assembly here, the lower and the upper cover. We get the spring, the washer, and the new O-ring. Put some assembly lube on there. So we're just gonna pop the assembly in here, like so. The rear exhaust, just to make sure everything is on there. We're gonna pop in the pushers now. This is the intake. I put a light coat of oil on it and assembly lube on both ends. I marked it during assembly so I know that this way is up. Get it through here. I'm just gonna lift the cover just to verify that the push rod is seating nicely in the lifter. We got the exhaust. First we need the O-ring for the breather hole. Put some assembly lube on there. Put some assembly lube on the rockers. And I also pumped some oil for the shafts as well. You can pump some oil through those feed holes for both shafts. The two shorter bolts facing that way, and the two longer bolts facing outward. So I'm just going to run all the bolts in to take out the slack. Now I'm going to start tightening the bolts in a crisscross pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, but only a quarter turn at a time. And keep checking whether or not you can still rotate the push rods. If you can't rotate the push rods, then you have to wait for the lifters to bleed down and then continue. Checking the push rods, and I can't rotate them, so I'm gonna wait 10-15 minutes and come back to it. In about 15 minutes I can now rotate the push rods so I can continue with the quarter turns. Same again, I can't turn the push rods, so there's tension on the valve train, so I'm going to walk away for another 15 minutes and come back. I snugged all the bolts now. Had to walk away around 5 times, just snug them all down safely. So now I'm going to torque them down to 17 foot-pounds. I'm going to be using a small torque wrench with a smaller 1/2-inch socket because there's not a lot of room in here. Bolt number 1, and if the socket is any deeper than this, it's not gonna fit. So luckily I found one. So that's all done. So now we just need to install the breather assembly, replace the valve, get a new gasket here, the new filter goes in here, and we got the new gasket on here as well. Need to tilt it a little bit to be able to get it in. Just gonna run the bolts in. 3/8. Torque them down to 110 inch-pounds. Ready to install the retainers now. First thing I'm doing is pushing the lower cover into the O-ring in the lifter cover, and then pushing the upper cover while holding the spring into the O-ring in the cylinder head. To get it in position. Get the retainer, your flathead screwdriver, push down on the spring, pushing the retainer, you're done. This one's already in position. Got the rocker cover ready to install. New gasket. Screws have blue Loctite on them. Shorter screws the other side, longer screws facing me. Just gonna run them all in. I slugged them all down, so I'm going to torque them down to 11 foot-pounds in the following order: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On the fifth one, I need to use a 7/16 wrench because there's just no room and I have no adapter for my torque wrench. I'm just going to finish up the front top end now. I just set it on TDC, on the compression stroke. Exactly the same procedure what we did in part 1. The only difference is that this time you're watching the intake push rod going up and down. The rest is the same. I'm going to assemble everything just like on the rear, and then we're going to get the oil system primed. Finish the top end now. I'll tidy it up nicely. Install the oil filter, fill it up with oil prior to installation because it helps with the priming. Fresh oil in there. Reconnect the negative battery cable. Plugs are out, but it's best to ground them as you're cranking the motor. And now we're going to prime the oil pump and circulate the oil. Shoot a few more seconds. Okay, we got oil pressure. Good news. A few more seconds just to circulate the oil properly. All right, so we just need to put the spark plugs back in, install the gas tank, the seat, air cleaner cover, exhaust, and we'll fire her up. Alrighty, let's fire her up. Warm up a little bit, take it out for a ride. Alright guys, just got back from the ride. Cooling down, all working fine, no oil leaks. The project is done. Thanks for sticking with me through this long 3-part series. See you next time.